So you may have seen me unbox this thing, and you may have seen me put this thing together in a very almost too excited manner in a very hastily made video. But now we're going to try and talk about it for real. And obviously, we've got the big thing here. We've got Jabba's Sail Barge, the KHETANNA from the Haslab imprint from Hasbro. Now, this thing was, of course, if you don't already know, this was the Kickstarter-esque thing that came out of Toy Fair last year. The goal was 5,000 units at $500, and it almost didn't make it until the few days right before. Everything just sort of went off the rails, and this thing exceeded expectations, smashed its goal, and there were between 8,000 and 9,000 units ordered. And less than a year later, we have it in our homes, and it's frankly, it's a crazy sight to get a 4-foot-long sail barge brought into your house. It's also really cool. So we've got to talk about this thing. We're going to talk about the packaging first, and then we're going to get inside and take a look at this thing, see what it's got, see all the crazy details, and of course talk about some of the extra stuff that it comes with. So for the packaging here, we have got a truly massive, and I can't understate that, massive box. This thing is enormous, so of course it has to come in an equally enormous box. We've got a great shot of the barge with a bunch of figures on it reenacting the scenes from Return of the Jedi. You've got it in a nice sand landscape, a sandscape I suppose, with the Sarlacc pit out there. You've got a nice vintage call out to the Yak Face figure that's inside. The top of the box features a tremendous spread of interior shots that showcase what you can do with already existing figures to create scenes, to recreate scenes, to just have fun with the thing. And then the back side of the box has a great black and white image of the barge in all of its glory. So just excellent packaging all around. I love the vintage collection look and feel when it comes to the box art, to the card art, and this thing is no exception. They went to town to make sure that this enormous toy comes in a fantastic yet enormous box. All right, and here it is out of the package, and to say this thing is impressive in person is really an understatement. It's very difficult to convey just how cool this thing is unless you're sitting right in front of it, and frankly even then there's still a lot to take in with this guy. So we've got what is essentially a 4-foot long vehicle slash playset for your 3 3/4 inch Star Wars collection. It is an incredibly well detailed, incredibly well sculpted, and just incredibly well jam-packed toy here. And I mean, it's a toy, it's a $500 toy, but this still has a lot of play value. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through, I guess, all the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about the outside, we're going to talk about construction, and then we'll get inside and take a look at everything that's in there, because while there's a lot to take in on the outside, the inside just has got so much going on. So from nose to tail, this thing again is roughly 4 feet long, and you can see that it is decoed out in a varying array of browns, hues of browns basically. So we've got a very dark brown hull with some rustic type shading, and then there is a lot of dry brushing all over it to make it look dirty, make it look sand washed. You can see all the panels that run down, so there's a tremendous amount of sculpting across this beast, with no better way to say it, throughout this beast. And you've got all the little window flaps that you can see there. We've got some little antennas that you have to stick in yourself, and then you've got just tons and tons of paneling, a lot of detail that runs along the side that goes all the way back to the engine bay, which has some detailing on the outside. There's some little pieces you have to actually stick in on the bottom, which frankly I think they're going to get lost one day, but we'll deal with that when we get there, I suppose. And then this guy sits on 4 acrylic stands that raise it a couple inches off the ground, or in my case, my daughter's play table. And these things kind of clip in and they lock in underneath. They seem to lock in really tight, so be careful when you're putting them in, I suppose. I have had no issues with that, but it's just something to keep an eye out for. What's really cool is about the outside of this, though, and we'll talk about it more, is that these panels pop off, and that's how you get inside this thing. But on top of that, we do have a few moving parts with this guy. So if you recall from Return of the Jedi, when they're getting ready to throw everybody into the pit of Carkoon, into the Sarlacc pit, we have got a bunch of gawkers that are standing outside, and then we've got a bunch of gawkers that are inside that are opening the shutters on a Jabba's Sail Barge. And you can actually do that with a selection of these. They don't all do it, but all of those rectangular pieces that you see, those are supposed to be the shutters, and some of them open, because not all of them were opened in the film, so some of them open, and I love that little detail. You can get them open and see a figure peeking out of there, which is really cool. And then you have got the articulated fins that are down on the side. You actually do have to assemble those pieces, but they're nicely sculpted, nicely painted. They do have that same kind of rustic look to them, and they're attached with very bronze, brass type of looking struts almost. They just kind of pivot a little bit. They don't really do a great deal. They're just there for stability for the ship, so they only do so much. Now there is another side to this thing, of course. So we've got maybe the business side of things, the side that doesn't do quite as much, and then we've got the party side, the side that opens up, that shows us all the goods on the inside, and also has a number of the action features. The other side of the ship has all of that same sculpt, all of that same detailing that you'd expect to find throughout the ship. It's just not as versatile. It's more to keep the whole thing together, basically. It does, of course, have a moving fin, though, just like the other side, and then it also has some opening shutters as well. So there are a few play features on that side. It's just more for show. It doesn't open up, and it's really not the side you're going to display. Although you could, but I'm not sure you would. Of course, we have to talk about the defining characteristic of this sail barge, the sails. They are kind of odd in the context of the Star Wars universe for the most part. We've seen sails on other things, but this guy is a whole different story. So we've got the sail barge's two iconic sails here, and they're done up in kind of a heavy-duty orangish kind of fabric. It's very, very heavy duty. It will withstand some tension because frankly, it does seem rather difficult to put these together. It's not too tough, and I kind of mentioned this in my unboxing video, in my assembly video. It just takes a little doing. You don't really have to work at it too hard. I was able to figure it out relatively quickly, but they do take some work, and frankly, once you're done, they look really, really nice. Now, I do think that, of course, over time, we might see some issues with them. It is soft goods, so who knows what time will tell, but I also think that the one maybe negative when it comes to this thing is that you're never really going to get these things to truly be flat. The actual sails themselves have these brown plastic struts that run through them, and it's what keeps it tight, and it keeps it erect and basically makes it keep the shape. But they also want to roll up onto each other because they come rolled up. So eventually you're going to get some wrinkling like I've already got here, and it's to be expected. I don't think it's a real negative. It's just, you know, the one thing that if somebody sees it and they don't know, they might say, well, look at that, your big $500 toy has got wrinkles in its sails. But I think that for the most part they very much look really nice. They've got some nice stitching in there to hold them all together, and then the insides do look really nice as well. So that brown strut design that's on the interior of it actually looks really good. So I don't have any true issues with how these things are put together. I think Hasbro did a really, really nice job with their design, and frankly, they look just like the movie counterpart. So if there's anything to complain about, it's that you're going to get some wrinkling here and there. You can see wrinkling, you know, on both sails, but it's not that bad, and otherwise they're just fantastic looking. They truly are this toy's and this ship's key characteristic, and I think they absolutely nailed the design. So I've taken the sails off to give you a better idea of what this thing looks like as far as the deck goes. So you've got the whole deal here, and you can see that, you know, just to talk about the sails again, we have got ports here, that's where they go, and I had been concerned that you couldn't take these out because they kind of lock into place, but they just pull right out. It may take a little more force than you want, but frankly it seems to be just fine. So you've got one here in between these two pods, and then you've got another one back here that sits behind the main cannon. And while they look great while they're there, I am slightly concerned about this one just because of the fact that the gun is kind of in the way. It's got this big, I don't know, whatever you want to call this thing, and it's going right over top of that. So you have to position this accordingly. Once it's there, it's fine, but if you try to swing it around, you're going to hit that strut, so just kind of watch out. But we're going to kind of run from front to back on this thing and kind of talk about everything because frankly, there's a lot of stuff going on. So to start at the front, you have got these cables up here that have a lot of patinaed paint job on it, a lot of rusted paint job, which basically runs throughout this ship. If there's one color or theme that you have with Jabba's Sail Barge, it's rust and dirt, which frankly, works really well. But there's a lot of line work that runs through the floor of the deck. You've got these grates that sit up there, but there's also an action feature already up here, and there's quite a few action features up top. So you've got a button here on the side, and if you push it, it releases the trap door and people fall down into the jail cell below. So we threw a Praetorian Guard in there because what business does he have being on a sail barge? We have got a couple other compartments further back. We already talked about those that surround the first strut, and you can pull those doors open and you can have more figures pop up onto the deck to surprise Luke Skywalker or whoever you've put on here. And then we've got two of the side cannons, and these don't necessarily have to be here, but there are 6 spots for these guns across the entire barge. They just peg in, and these guys are articulated, so they rotate, and then they also hinge. So you can move these around, you can reposition them, you can have a character on them, but you can also put them throughout the barge itself. And then a little further back, we've got another large compartment that pops up out of the top. It has 2 doors that spring open and a grate that slides backwards, so you can have more characters come out onto the deck. Of course, following that, we have the large main cannon, which frankly is really nicely detailed. It's got a great deal of paint wash on it to make it look gritty and grimy and sandy and nasty, and you can put a figure on that. And of course, I've already mentioned, I think it's slightly problematic with how it works, but it does move around really nicely. I have no issues with it sticking or anything like that. It just sort of pegs onto a little nub that sticks out of there. And then moving further back, you've got a ladder that takes your figures up to towards the back of the boat with some engine type compartments, engine type pieces. You know what a space engine looks like, right? So you've got a bunch of stuff up here. There's really a lot going on the outside of this thing, and most of it really is on the deck. And I think they did a really good job of allowing you to have a lot of room to put figures on the top of the deck to make it, an actual play type of area. Not to mention the fact that we've got a lot of play features, a lot of action features, and just a lot of moving parts, so you can actually do stuff with this, not just put figures on top of it and have kind of a diorama. You can actually have a play field to actually reenact a scene from Return of the Jedi. So now we need to get inside this thing, and frankly, that's where things get really exciting, really interesting. And there are 5 panels on the outside of this ship. There's one up here at the front, this guy, this big guy, this is the big one, and then we've got a small one back here. So basically what I tend to do is pull off this one first, this middle one. It allows you to more readily get to the others, and then you just start popping the pieces apart, and then you will reveal what's inside the shell of this thing. And frankly, you get just a tremendous sense of wonder when you look in this thing, because there is so much going on, not to mention the fact that you've got a big Jabba the Hutt staring right at you. So let's dig right in and take a look at all of everything that's inside the sail barge. But here is quite literally the main event when it comes to this vehicle, to this playset, to whatever you want to call it. And that, of course, is going to be the interior. And frankly, there is just so much going on here. There is literally 1,000,001 details crammed into this thing that it's incredibly likely that I'm going to miss something, or that I have already missed something. Because every time I look at this thing, I noticed a little difference, or something that I missed, or something that is just kind of tucked away in a corner. They really went all out in making sure that the inner workings of this guy was absolutely top-notch, and I really think that they've done a bang-up job with everything in here. But we do have to take a look at some of the finer details and some of the highlights of the interior of this, frankly, cavernous vehicle. So we're going to start with the top. We're going to start with the front and work our way backwards. So we have got what might be the single most detailed area in the entire vehicle, and that would of course be the pilot's cabin. So this front area has a smaller piece that breaks off to expose the cockpit, and you can see we've got 2 spots here for pilots. There is a little bit of a standing room for a third figure, and there's just tons and tons of detail crammed into this thing. Tons of paint apps, tons of sculpted detail. Really, there is a lot of stuff, and it's frankly just that, it's stuff. There's a lot of bits and bobs and doodads all over this thing to really make you kind of take a second and look and see, wow, there really is a tremendous amount of sculpt work that went into this thing. And of course, you can fairly easily easily fit some figures in there. I don't have too many issues fitting figures into that cockpit, even figures that aren't Star Wars figures. And then you move further back and there is a doorway that will allow you to move further backwards into kind of the first compartment, which may or may not have a door in its way. And this is where one of the action features comes into play for the inside. So you've got a moving door here that goes back into the galley area, but this reveals the dungeon or the prison cell, which why Jabba has a prison cell on his luxury boat, I will never understand. But this thing has the desiccated corpse of an Ithorian tucked away back there. This also comes with a few chains that you can use for him or for another character as well, which frankly, this thing is one of my favorite aspects of the entire playset, of the entire vehicle, just because it's such a cool little detail and frankly, it's sculpted really, really well. And then if you move further on back, you will begin to see kind of Jabba's kitchen area where they prepare all of his weird space frog type food that we see him eat in the Phantom Menace and in Return of the Jedi. A lot of detail in here. We've got sinks, and then you've just got tons of woodwork and a bunch of standing room, really. There's a lot of wide open spaces here that take us backwards into the area that has the ladders that lead up to some of those compartments on the roof. And then further back, you've got kind of an armory area, which has some weaponry on the walls. There is a spot to put other weapons, and then more stairs that lead up to that second compartment, the larger compartment that has kind of the walkout area on the upper deck. So there is just a lot of detail in here, a lot of sculpted detail, a lot of paint, a lot of rusted, nasty, dirty detail. And of course, we do have another play feature here. We've got a smuggler's compartment, which frankly, I find odd. I'm not sure, again, why would there be a smuggling compartment on the most notorious crime lord's vessel? It's obvious that he's a crime boss, he's a crime lord. He's obviously up to no good, so why does it matter? What's he got to hide? But you can stash something in there, maybe a corpse, whatever you want to do. But in general, everything in this half of the ship is kind of dedicated to other figures and other characters, things you want to do to kind of bring some play value into this thing. The rest of the boat is all Jabba territory. And this is where the big man himself sits, and we've got his dais, so similar to what we see him sit on in his palace, just a different version of that. And it's got, his little control pad there. It's got the big ostentatious gold backing piece, and it's form-fitted perfectly for the figure that we get in this package. And this thing actually has another play feature. It allows him to move. It kind of shimmies back and forth if you want to switch him up a little bit. When he's trying to view someone being dumped into the Sarlacc pit, they move him from side to side. But there's a ton of detail back here. It's mostly a more regal almost type of setting where it's a little more ornate, it's a little more finely detailed. He has got a very odd kind of relief painting of himself on the wall surrounded by a harem. We've got a Gamorrean's head mounted on the wall. We've got a Rancor, like a bronze Rancor statue mounted on the wall. There's just all sorts of little details back here, and everything on this half of the ship is definitely cleaner. It looks nicer, which is kind of weird when you think about Jabba the Hutt. You don't think clean and nice, but he's incredibly rich and powerful, so obviously he would surround himself with nice things, and that's what this half of the ship is all about. Tons and tons of small details to make things look nice and clean. The nice wood paneling on the floor is a stark contrast to kind of the metal plating that's throughout the rest of the ship, not to mention the tall golden pillars that line the back. So there's just a lot of cool stuff here. I mean, frankly, like I said, it's hard to imagine that I didn't miss something when I kind of run through this stuff, but from the front to the back, there is just not only a tremendous amount of space to put your figures and to play around, but everything is painted. Everything has little sculpted details here and there to make this seem as expensive as it truly is. Not to mention the fact that it's just cool. I don't really know a better word to say here. This thing is so cool to look at, so cool to pop open and play around with. Everything about the idea of taking the side panels off and exposing the whole inner workings really elevates this thing just to an entirely different level. Now, of course, we have to talk about the Exalted One himself. So, of course, the barge does come with a Jabba the Hutt figure that specifically fits in the dais that they have constructed for the barge. This guy, I believe, is a repaint of the Black Series 3 3/4 line Jabba the Hutt that came out years back. That's the one that came in the Rancor pit set which I don't have, unfortunately, to compare with, but this guy's just got updated paint apps, basically. And I don't really have too much to complain about or to really praise about. It's a Jabba the Hutt. It looks good, and it does exactly what you need for this set. He looks fantastic sitting on that dais, surrounded by, you know, whatever you want, or alone, frankly. He works really well. As far as articulation goes, you've got a swivel here at the chest or neck or whatever part of his body that is. You've got hinges and rotation at the shoulder, hinge and rotation at the elbow here, and then you've got hinge and rotation at the wrists. So he's, you know, basically what you expect to find in a Jabba the Hutt figure. I think the face printing on him is pretty nice. Everything as far as colors and sculpt looks really good. You've got the little sucker holes down here at the bottom. You've got the big gash down here on his tail, and then the backside just has a bunch more paint work and a bunch of scaly, nasty, wormy space slug grossness. So frankly, there's not a whole lot to discuss with this guy. He just looks fantastic, and again, he accomplishes exactly what you need for this set for the Sail Barge, because it's not a complete set without Jabba, and if you didn't already have one, you got one now. And then last but certainly not least, as far as what we get with the barge, you know, the big thing as far as extras goes was, of course, the Yak Face figure that was being premiered, well, sort of premiered, in the Vintage Collection finally. We do, of course, already have this figure outside of the barge. He comes in the standard mainline release, although he does not have this cup accessory. So that's the one difference between the two outside of the packaging. Other than that, the figure is the same, and the figure is pretty stellar, all things considered. So barge or no barge, if you're interested in Yak Face, you've got to get the Vintage Collection figure. The big draw for this guy, though, of course, is the card back that he comes on, and of course it mimics that vintage style Power of the Force line with the Kenner logo, with that hot pink background there. You've got the little hot pink name call out down there as well, and just that great vintage style artwork there on the card back. You've of course got a collector coin that goes on with it. Mine is upside down, unfortunately, in here, and it does say Yak Face. It's got his picture emblazoned on it, and it says Bounty Hunter up there. What I really like about this card back is the nameplate up there with that silver and blue and red, and then of course Luke's green lightsaber, because I love the green lightsaber personally. And then we do have a very vintage inspired card back here as well, with a shot of Yak Face from the movie, with a shot of the coins down there in the bottom right, and then you've got this special call out down here, and of course you've got a bio for Yak Face himself. You got the Disney logo, the Hasbro logo as well, and this guy is VC000 as far as his Vintage Collection number. So the Yak Face in the main line does have a number. This guy is specific in his packaging so that he gets the special designation of 000, which frankly I think is just plain cool. So, you know, this is definitely a really interesting thing. I love it. This guy is going for hundreds of dollars on his own. So I'm not the only person that thinks this is a cool figure. This is definitely staying in the package. As soon as I'm done here, it is going in a protective case because I don't want it to be messed up. It's pretty pristine, all things considered. I haven't really noticed any real defects. Glue on the bubble looks pretty good. So frankly, I am really, really happy with this figure. It's all about that card back for me because I've already got the figure, but the whole presentation just absolutely nails it. So once it's all said and done, I suppose the real question here is, do I think it was worth it? You know, I paid $500 for this almost a year ago up front. And frankly, I do think it was worth it. I think Hasbro's Haslab idea was a success, and it shows in the fact that they crushed their goal. I think the product that we got at the end was very much worth the money. I think they have basically created one of their crown jewels. It's got to be up there with, say, the G.I. Joe USS Flag, although I don't really think they're on the same level based on detail involved. But I do think that it is definitely one of those type of things, something that is kind of legendary among collectors in a sense. Frankly, I really, really like it. I don't really have anything to gripe about. I think the detail is exquisite. I think the sculpt is amazing. Everything is just very nicely done. I really like it. It's definitely one of those centerpiece type of items, not to mention the fact that we get a fantastic new Jabba the Hutt with it. Well, an updated Jabba the Hutt with great new paint applications, and we get the mythical Yak Face on a vintage Power of the Force card, which is always nice to kind of sweeten the pot. So I very much am happy with my purchase. I'm glad that I backed this thing. I'm certainly glad that I do not even have to consider paying the aftermarket prices for this thing, and I am very much looking forward to what Hasbro could do with Haslabs in the future. Whether that is Star Wars or not, we will see, but I think this is a great way to see what they're capable of when they have the ability to go all out, because this thing is truly fantastic. So that's going to do it for this look at the Haslab Star Wars The Vintage Collection Jabba's Sail Barge. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.